Welcome to our Nova Campfire on relational intelligence in an AI world, shaping the future of human connection. Today we're exploring the deeply human capacity to create meaning and emotional connection with others and to navigate complexity not only with ingenuity but also with wisdom, care and love. As artificial intelligence increasingly shapes education, work, health and social life, we are asking what it means to preserve and cultivate the distinctly human capacities that cannot be automated. We're really delighted to see everybody, and a special welcome if you're joining us for the first time. We do invite you to put your cameras on if you can, to help create that sense of community, which is really what this session is all about. My name is Susan Prescott. I'm Director of the Nova Centre for Planetary Consciousness and Global Flourishing, as well as a Professor of Planetary Health at the University of Western Australia and an Artist in Residence at Yale University with the Office of Planetary Health and Global Engagement in the Yale School of Nursing. And we begin our session with the universal acknowledgement to celebrate all people, places and our planet, and acknowledge all wisdom, past, present and emerging, and the spirit of the earth that sustains us all with gratitude, love and respect. Thank you. As always, we are deeply grateful to the Nova Institute for making these conversations possible, and I would now like to invite Dr. Brian Berman, President and founder of the Nova Institute for Health, to offer a few opening remarks. Thanks very much, Brian.
Thank you, Susan, and hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you today. I'm Brian Berman. I'm president and founder of the Nova Institute for Health, and I'm deeply grateful to gather with you at this campfire, a space where we can connect and explore what it means to live with greater wholeness and humanity. At Nova, we pride ourselves on looking at the grand challenges of our times and through the lens of many different perspectives, finding new solutions. And today's discussion about relational intelligence in the age of artificial intelligence couldn't be more timely. We're living through a moment of profound societal transformation. Many of our core institutions, including education, healthcare, and media, are already on the precipice of tremendous change. AI is advancing at a pace that's rapidly reshaping how we work, learn, and communicate. And at the same time, we're seeing a rise in loneliness, polarization, and a fraying of the social fabric that sustains our well-being. So today, we're gathered to discuss the importance of relationships and relational intelligence in this era of artificial intelligence. A longitudinal study on adult development being conducted by Harvard since the end of World War II shows that at an individual level, one of the key factors impacting our health and ability to flourish is strong relationships. Relationships are the foundation of healthy communities. When trust erodes, when empathy thins, we lose the ability to truly listen to one another. But when relationships are strong, when they're rooted in compassion, curiosity, and mutual respect, societies can flourish. This is why relational intelligence is not just a skill, it's a form of collective resilience, essential for navigating uncertainty and shaping a future where everyone can thrive. So how do we cultivate presence, empathy, and authenticity in a world increasingly mediated by machines? How do we ensure that nature, a living, breathing life force, remains central to our existence? And how do we build trust in order to bridge our differences rather than widen them? And as we explore these themes together today, my hope is that we'll ask ourselves, how do we control the narrative and not relinquish our humanity to machines and algorithms? Standing at this crossroads in time, how do we deepen our understanding of what it means to be truly connected to ourselves, to one another, and to the wider world? So thank you for bringing your curiosity, your openness, and your shared commitment to shaping a future where humanity is cherished above all else. With that, I'll turn things back over to Susan to lead us into the conversation.
Thank you very much, Brian. And before we begin, I would like to invite Rick Scott to lead us in a mindful moment, an opportunity to consciously bring ourselves into connection together as we move into dialogue. Thank you very much, Rick.
Thank you, Susan. So let's begin by finding a comfortable position with your head, neck, and spine aligned, with your arms and legs in a position that's comfortable for you. And if you'd like to, you may turn off your video for the next few moments. So let's begin by taking a few relaxing breaths. Just becoming aware of your breath as it enters your body and as it leaves your body. And if you'd like to, gently close your eyes or allow your gaze to soften. And with your next inhalation, imagining that you are breathing in peace, calmness, and tranquility. And with your exhalation, imagining that you are breathing out any tension or discomfort that you may be feeling. Inhaling peace, calmness, and tranquility, and exhaling any tension or discomfort that you may be feeling. Allowing your mind and body to become still and quiet as we sit together in silence for a few moments. And when you are ready, return your attention to this space and gently open your eyes. And we also encourage you to turn on your videos to foster a sense of community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rick. Now, just to overview our schedule, as usual, I'll begin with a short introduction to frame the topic, and then we will hear from our wonderful panel of speakers, each offering a different perspective, and then we will conclude with open discussion, which everyone is welcome to contribute to. So we will go to my intro now. Thank you very much. Our discussion today is on relational intelligence and the challenges of shaping human connection in an AI world. We are living through a period of profound transformation. Accelerating advances in artificial intelligence are radically reshaping how we work, learn, communicate, and make decisions at a pace that exceeds our ability to fully understand these changes or their long-term implications. While these technologies offer remarkable possibilities, they also reveal a deeper tension. At a time when we have never been more technologically connected, many are experiencing an increasing sense of disconnection from real relationships, community, and meaning and purpose. At the same time, the rapid expansion of AI carries growing environmental and social implications, from increasing energy and resource demands to shifting patterns of work and human contribution, raising important questions about sustainability, equity, and how this will affect the complex, often strained relationships between humans and planetary systems. These challenges are not only technical or economic, but relational, cultural, and spiritual, calling for deeper reflection on how they may shape human potential and the future we are creating. As machines become more capable of analysing, predicting, and even simulating aspects of human interaction, questions arise about what remains uniquely human and what must be intentionally cultivated if we are to flourish. This calls for greater attention to the relational capacities that underpin well-being, learning, cooperation and resilience. The ability to create meaning with others, build trust, navigate tension, and respond to complexity with awareness and care may be among the most important yet overlooked capacities of our time. These capacities are shaped early in life through patterns of connection and experience, now increasingly influenced by digital and AI-mediated environments, influencing how we relate, learn and engage with the world. Early relationships and learning environments are therefore central, not peripheral, to health, agency, social participation and meaning-making across the lifespan, with implications that extend far beyond the individual to society as a whole. At the same time, insights from across disciplines, from behavioural economics to social science, are challenging long-held assumptions about what drives individual and collective flourishing. Relational and emotional capacities, often dismissed as soft, are being recognised as core conditions for life satisfaction, meaning, cooperation, and even economic prosperity. Yet these are enabling foundations for society that can function effectively, equitably, and sustainably in the face of complexity. These challenges also create opportunities to bring people together. The AI revolution has already opened new spaces for dialogue and collaboration, bringing together perspectives that rarely converge in such immediate and meaningful ways. Once rare transdisciplinary dialogues and whole university summits are becoming more common, convening disciplines across the sciences and humanities in shared inquiry. This is generating new insights and possibilities that no single discipline could produce alone. In turn, it is expanding not only what we can do, but how we can create new understanding together, open new possibilities for unique forms of human problem solving, grounded in connection, creativity, and shared insight. This, in turn, invites a shift not only in what we value, but in how we learn. In a world where knowledge is increasingly accessible and rapidly evolving, the ability to adapt, to think systematically, and to remain open and curious is becoming essential. Capacities such as self-awareness, systems thinking, and learning how to learn are emerging as critical meta skills, supporting not only productivity, but deeper understanding and more conscious engagement with a rapidly changing world. Together, these form the scaffolding for navigating uncertainty rather than seeking to eliminate it. Uncertainty itself has become a defining feature of our time. As familiar structures and assumptions are renegotiated, we are invited into a different kind of orientation, one that does not rely on fixed answers, but on the capacity to remain present, attentive, and responsive amid ongoing and radical change. This calls for a deeper engagement with the questions of meaning, consciousness, and what it means to live together in a world that is continually being reshaped. Taken together, these shifts point toward what might be understood as a relational renaissance, a recentering of the human capacities that underpin care and connection and shared meaning. At its heart, this is a re-examination of what it means to be human in a time of profound technological change. This is not a retreat from technology, but an invitation to ensure that technical progress is aligned with the deeper conditions for human and planetary flourishing, including the relational, ethical, and the spiritual dimensions of life that cannot be automated. Ultimately, the question is not only how we adapt to a rapidly changing world, but how do we do so in a way that strengthens our capacity to relate to ourselves, each other, and the wider systems of life of which we are a part. It is also a question of how we cultivate meaning, purpose, and a deeper sense of connection amidst uncertainty. In this, relational intelligence becomes not simply a concept, but a guiding orientation for the future we are collectively shaping. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our wonderful panellists. Each will speak for around 7 minutes, and I encourage you to explore their bios in the chat link so we can maximise their time. To begin with, I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Isabelle Howe, Executive Director of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning. Isabelle is a visionary leader working at the intersection of early childhood development, brain science, technology, and inclusive learning. Her work has helped transform how we understand the role of care, connection, and relational intelligence in nurturing children's capacity to learn and to thrive. Her book, Love to Learn, The Transformative Power of Care and Connection in Early Education, speaks directly to the heart of this discussion. Isabelle will help ground our conversation in the earliest foundations of human connections and what they can teach us about cultivating relational intelligence in this rapidly changing world. Thank you very much, Isabelle.
Thank you, Susan. What a beautiful, beautiful video. And also, I love the title of Campfire. And I already feel the warmth of this community through this title and through the thoughtfulness of this beautiful artistic introduction. So thank you, Susan, thank you, Rick, and thank you, Brian, for the invitation. Let me share a few slides with all of you. So very much in line with Brian's introduction and Susan's beautiful introductory video, it is very clear to all of us that we stand at a pivotal moment in human history where AI is advancing at extraordinary speed. Just earlier this week, I had the opportunity to be both with Google DeepMind and with OpenAI, so two of the leading AI labs, and it's very clear that this extraordinary speed will continue and is already here. Yeah. So the question, as we already heard, is no longer whether AI will transform our society, because it already is, and it will continue doing so. I think the deeper question is really this, is as machines become more intelligent, become more performant as these forms of intelligence, what will become more valuable about being human? And I believe the answer may be found in something that we have in some ways overlooked for too long, which is our capacity to build relationships. And that makes this discussion today, that makes this concept of relational intelligence one of the defining capabilities of the 21st century. So if we zoom out across our very human history, we see actually a remarkable pattern, which is that human intelligence actually has continuously evolved. Biological intelligence helped us survive. Social intelligence helped us cooperate. Language allowed us to teach and communicate. Analytical intelligence gave us science, institutions, and modern economies. And today, we are clearly already, I would argue, in this age of artificial intelligence or hybrid intelligence. But perhaps, and this is what I want to convey today, is thinking collectively, and you know, with this group of us, what is the next frontier that we want to shape? And perhaps this next frontier is not artificial. Perhaps, or that's actually what I want to believe, I would like it to be relational. Relational as our ability to build trust, to navigate differences, to collaborate, especially on complex system change and societal issues, to repair conflict, to create collective flourishing. And every major leap in human progress over millions of years has depended not only on smarter individuals, but on stronger forms of human connection. In many ways, human evolution has always been relational. And modern neuroscience confirms this in many ways. We are all born, I like to say, we are all born billionaires. Not necessarily in monetary terms, but certainly in terms of the number of neurons in our brains. So every infant is born with about 100 billion neurons in their brains. So we are all born with extraordinary potential. But brains, our human brains, are not built in isolation. They actually develop through relationships. Developmental scientists have called this phenomenon serve and return interactions. Those serve and return interactions are actually very simple. This is when a baby smiles, when a caregiver responds, when an adult reacts, like this beautiful picture of a dad and his daughter reading together. Through essentially thousands of these interactions, neural pathways, or what is called in scientific terms, synaptic connections, are formed. Relationships literally shape brain architecture. And we've known this from various studies. Love is not simply emotional, it is developmental, neurological, biological. Relationships become biology. Our brains actually atrophies when we lack those nurturing, loving relationships. There have been many studies on this, but we can observe, for example, from Romanian orphanages studies, a brain atrophy of about 10% when children are deprived from loving relationships. And love is the architecture for learning. Relationships regulate stress, they create psychological safety, they strengthen motivation, they build resilience. And research consistently shows that strong teacher-student relationships have the largest effect size, meaning that they are one of the critical elements to improve learning and learning outcomes. Because belonging predicts engagement, connection predicts well-being. And so as a result, relationships are not separate from learning, they are actually foundational to learning and well-being. So we have this incredible body of science of relationships, but yet at the very moment when we are learning from science that relationships matter most, many indicators suggest that those very relationships are actually weakening. As Susan already spoke about, loneliness is rising, friendships are declining, intergenerational connection is something that has profoundly shaped our very own human species. So intergenerational connection is fading at this moment. For example, the stat that I put here on this stat of only 3% of children 0 to 18 in the US have ever connected with an adult above age 65 who is not a family member, suggests very clearly that we live in age-segregated societies. I would also speak about the role of technology briefly, where our attention is increasingly fragmented across young children. So, for example, 40% of children under age 2 now have their own device. but also on the adult side, and this is a US stat that shows that, but it's very much of a global phenomenon, that every one of us picks up, in average, our devices more than 200 times per day, which means that our attention is increasingly fragmented. So we have spent decades building this digital infrastructure, but I would argue that we have underinvested in the relational infrastructure. And now AI is arriving on top of this relational recession. AI, of course, offers extraordinary promises and extraordinary technology. It offers personalized learning, maybe greater accessibility, new forms of creativity, new scientific discovery, incredible things that are happening on the health side, for example. But it also raises profound questions, as millions of people are already forming emotional relationships with AI systems. What happens when artificial relationships become easier than human ones? And we all know that the beauty of human relationships involves some complexity or some friction. It involves some growth, some mutuality, some accountability, some complexity. So the greatest risk is not that AI becomes more human. The greatest risk, I think, is that humans becomes less human. So that brings me to one of my last thoughts here, which is that for much of the last century, we have organized, or we have had a dominant discourse on human intelligence, which has been framed around IQ. That's how we have organized our education systems around cognitive intelligence for the most part. Over the past 20, 30 years, there has been this introduction and this rise of emotional intelligence, or EQ, in the workplace and also in many education settings through social emotional learning curricula. But in the age of AI, I believe that we need to elevate a third form of intelligence, which I called RQ, relational intelligence, this ability to trust, to create belonging, to care for others, to strengthen communities. So as AI automates more analytical tasks, these uniquely human capacities will become increasingly valuable. And if you need an argument that's more coming from an economic perspective, this graph from one of my colleagues at the University of Chicago is very telling about the future of occupations, and shows, if you look at the little red area, the rise that's expected from the relational sector. Our future might be dominated or increasingly focused on relational economy or the relational sector. So what do we need? If relationships are this important, I think we need to treat them as infrastructure. And that means that we need to recenter this concept of relational intelligence and relationships in every single one of our elements of society, whether it's schools, workplaces, health system, and certainly technology itself. Because the future of human flourishing will, I believe, depend on the strength of this relational infrastructure. Susan already used this word, but let me emphasize it again. I believe that we need this relational renaissance, a future in which trust, empathy, belonging, and collaboration become core societal assets, a future where technological intelligence and relational intelligence really advance together, really in true partnership, because the defining question of our time is not how intelligent will machines become, it is, will humans become relationally wise enough to guide that intelligence toward human flourishing? And I will leave you with this thought. So as Susan mentioned, I had written this book called Love to Learn, But in so many ways, I believe that to love, to learn, we must first learn to love. Thank you, Susan.
This is just so wonderful, Isabelle. Thank you so much. You really have so beautifully grounded this conversation in the earliest foundations of human connections, and just how vital a role that care, relationship and love play in learning, growing and flourishing. This is really foundational to how we will nurture a more conscious and relational world with, I think you pointed out, the potential of actually inviting a new era of human evolution. So thank you once again. This brings us to the next layer of the conversation, the human meta skills we need in the AI age, capacities which have already been mentioned, such as self-awareness, systems thinking, deep listening, and learning how to learn. So it's now my great pleasure to welcome Calvin Niles, a creative communicator and strategic storyteller working at the intersection of technology and human transformation. Calvin works with global audiences in the technology sector, exploring how inner and systemic change can shape more human-centered futures. So welcome, Calvin.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Hello, everybody. Good to be here, and definitely good to hear some of the grounding that we just got from both Susan and Isabelle. Well, let me just start by saying I think that Susan's already talked about the shifts that are happening in our world and in society. And we heard from Isabelle about if technology is becoming more human, specifically AI, and are we becoming less human? I think what I wanted to do is just introduce a common reference for us, at least for the next 5 minutes, as I talk about these meta skills. And I want to introduce the meta skills maybe as a way to have a further conversation as we go into plenary after this. But I want to give it some grounding. And so what do we mean by the age of AI? And that's where I want to start, to say, well, Susan already pointed out that it means that we're changing how we create, how we decide, how we relate, how we communicate, and all of that. But it's not just that the technology is changing, it's also about us changing. So part of it, as Isabelle's already pointed out, is that we have to think about how we want to show up in the future, but also how does technology change us now? And how has it been changing us in the past? And that's where I wanted to do a little bit of grounding. So you may have heard of a man called Marshall McLuhan. He was a philosopher and a media professor in the 60s. And he talks about how technology has effectively changed humankind in all kinds of ways. It's changed the way we think about our structures and our relationships. He talks a lot about how the printing press has changed the way that we digest information. He talks about television a lot and how we have a much more immersive experience in media. And what he really, his book was about, and his papers were about, was the medium was the message. So it wasn't just that the content of a communication was obviously important, but also that the communication medium itself was very transformational for our society. He talked about the World Wide Web and how that created a global village, and was able to forecast this many, many, many years ago. And one thing he talked about as well as a clear example is the railways. And that's somewhere that I worked for before I worked in technology. I spent over a decade in the railways in commercial roles, operational roles. And a couple of things I can tell you about how the railways have changed our society. One really obvious thing that people maybe don't think about much is the standardization of national time. You know, local communities used to have their own local time using a sundial. And even in Bristol and London and Devon, there could be up to 15, 20 minutes of differences in time between these cities. But the railway, in order to offer a reliable timetable, had a standardized time. So we had a period in history where both the railway time and the local time was actually running in parallel. So you could be completely experiencing a different time locally, which we do now. That eventually led to the nationalization and standardization of time across the whole of the UK. So what that meant really, and what that means for us, is to invite the question, if the railway could really standardize time for us, can change relationships, can make cities more accessible, to think how we relate, think about work, build societies, how we build railway structures around villages, and then instead, now we build villages around railway structures. What does that mean for AI and how that's going to change how we show up, and how is it going to change our system? So when we talk about the system then, and we think about how our system shapes, I guess, things in different ways that knock-on effect, I think to think of it as a change in one part of a system that often create consequences elsewhere. And I can tell you something else about the railway as a person who used to enjoy making whiskey mixes, is that everybody was like, I really want to have PT whiskey. I love PT whiskey. People come from all over the world to Scotland to get PT whiskey from the Scottish Isles. But it was actually the railway that proliferated across the mainland and was able to take coal all across the mainland and swap the whiskey distillation process from peat to coal, and that effectively changed the flavor. And peat then became a rarer thing. So that's an example of a system that's impacted, where one part of the system creates a knock-on effect through other parts and changes an entire system. So when we start to think about systems change, we start to think about systems thinking. We want to look at the whole and how the impact of one change could lead to a whole systemic change. So as we talk about self-awareness, systems thinking, and learning how to learn, there are a number of ways we could do that, and three of them that I really want to point out. But self-awareness, I mean, the OECD, the Organization of Economic and Cooperative Development, talks about metacognition as being a skill. We talk about these skills, metacognition being a skill for the future. Thinking about it as thinking about thinking, but I prefer to think about it as noticing our thinking or becoming aware of our thinking. And so there's an awareness component here in the observation. So I say observe our own thoughts and assumptions, emotions, and behaviors. Systems thinking, of course, being part of the whole, as we talked about, and learning how to learn is that ability to adapt, to acquire knowledge, and respond to change. So the question is then, how does one master that? So I wanted to highlight three things that might lead us into another discussion when we move into the panel. The ones in bold here around the self-awareness. I'm talking about the observer self and cultivating this capacity in us to be aware of our internal dimensions, how we think, how we behave, how we feel. And how can we do that more often? How can we do that more intentionally? How can we practice that? There are ways we do that through connecting with nature. Meditation, as we had that wonderful grounding at the beginning of this session. There are ways of doing that by slowing down. I'm actually in Sweden now at the end of a week-long retreat, having done a lot of slowing down. And my Tai Chi teacher said, take it easy. We're already doing too much. And I think that there's something really important there to bring into the self-awareness cultivation. When we talk about systems thinking, the one I wanted to highlight here is following the thread. We use the railway example of, if we were to roll out this one thing and we followed that thread, thinking of the consequences of that on an onward basis, how would that continue to impact something else and then something else and something else? And that might expand our consideration of how a whole system might be impacted by a change. And in this age of AI, I guess one of the questions that I wrote down here is that if AI changes the way I learn, then what else changes for me? What else changes in my society? What else changes in my system? And then the final thing I wanted to talk about with learning how to learn was about reflecting on our own process of learning. How do we learn? We do a lot of talking, teaching, sharing. So we probably, what I'm calling learning in public is quite something that might be known to people. Seeking discomfort, that's the growth curve, that's the growth mindset, doing something difficult for the first time, or maybe doing it something difficult in repetition to strengthen a muscle that we haven't used often. But when it comes to reflecting on the process of learning, I've learned something new. How did I actually learn that? What was my process of acquiring this new information and embedding it, endogenizing that so that it is an acquired wisdom? So my invitation is, of course, for us to reflect on what it is that went into our process of learning, whether it's people, the most basic ways people talk about audio, talk about kinesthetic, talk about visual learning, but how else do we like to learn? How can we deepen our inquiry into the reflection in how we learned? What did I learn recently? And in this age of AI, I guess the question is, how does that change how I learn now? So these are three things I just wanted to share that might lead into a conversation around cultivating the observer, how we might do that and strengthen that in our own lives, how we would follow that thread and the consequences to see the whole impact on the system. And I'll just leave you with this one thing. So there's a MIT professor by the name of Peter Senge, who I was spending some time with last year and with a group. And I was taking him back to the airport, and we were talking about AI and how it's impacting society. And he was sharing with me an amazing book about burnout from humans and all the amazing work that was going on. And my question was, well, what if this, as Isabelle said, is an invitation for us to not just discover what it really means to be human, to be very intentional about the relationships that we cultivate. But what if we were to consider that AI is actually a big, not just change in society, but is a change in what it actually means to be us? If we're looking at it through the lens of Marshall McLuhan, or McLuhan to say it properly, then it really means that we are being changed in a very fundamental and profound way. And we really have an opportunity to strengthen these capacities. And that's my invitation. So I look forward to exploring further with you after, Susan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Calvin. That really was a wonderful reminder that the future of AI is not just about the tools and systems, but really about that quality of awareness that we bring to them, and why self-awareness and storytelling are not peripheral, but really central capacities for that wiser future. Thank you again. We now turn to the deeper cultural and philosophical questions raised by technology itself, and whether we can restore technology to its proper place, perhaps as a servant to what is human, relational and conducive to life. And our next speaker, Sylvie Barbier, will speak to this. She's an artist and a co-founder of Life Itself, an organisation dedicated to practical action for a radically wiser, weller world. Sylvia is also co-author of the Second Renaissance white paper, In Tech We Trust, which explores our relationship with technology and how it might evolve for a wiser future. Sylvia's just landed from London, and because we weren't sure whether she would be ready and able, we're going to play the video that she prepared, but she is here and we'll still involve her in the conversations afterwards. Happy with that? Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be here, and I'd love to share a little bit my thoughts on our relationship to technology, because our relationship with AI is born from our relationship to technology. And if you actually think about it, we human beings are already cyborgs. If I strip you naked and put you in the middle of the savannah, you probably wouldn't survive very long. Yet, thanks to our technology, we have been able to survive. If you think this piece of cloth that covers your body and maintains you from the experiencing too much cold was a revolution, help us survive. Our ability to make stones into arrows and throw them is what made us able to hunt. And we have shaped technology, and one thing that defines human being is our ability to create technology. And in reverse, technology has shaped us. Our bodies are maybe weaker than many animals, but our creativity, our mind have allowed us those other pathways through the creation of technology to survive. And so we might not like to think of ourselves as cyborg, but in a way we already are. And ultimately, what is really important in my view is to look even deeper. And our relationship with technology is actually completely intertwined with our relationship to death, to survival. And in a way, with AI, our pursuing of creating an intelligence greater than ourselves is a little bit of this desire for immortal life, that we can put our mind into machines, that we get disconnected from our body and go even further into this ethereal space. And yet we also see that AI requires huge amount of resource and power with those data centers. So nothing is truly ethereal. We are of the matter. And so our relationship with AI now touches deeply to if what makes us different from animal is maybe our intelligence, our consciousness. Today we might define ourselves more to how are we different from AI? And that might be our embodiment, that we are actually animals. And so if technology shapes us, our ability to carry water is what also have allowed us to move very far, then how conscious are we about that? How consciously are we shaping the technology that shapes us in return? And in this run into technology to save us, a technology that is a godlike, what do we want saving from? And I think we want saving from death, from impermanence. And so I think it's very important to allow ourselves to sit with actually this question of wanting to run away from Earth to go to Mars, running away from death and to upload our consciousness into an AI. What is our relationship with impermanence? And we are cosmic human beings. We are embodied human beings. We are animals. And so I think if we allow ourselves to sit with it, we can see that parts of what fuels this frenzy for AI is a bit like the story of Voldemort, who is so afraid of death that, creates Hohawks to put his soul and then destroy his humanity as he goes along the way. So I think this question around AI is a magnificent opportunity to question what makes us human. And why is it that we want to outsource our humanity? We want to outsource having to make choices. We want to outsource how to be wise. And ultimately, that choice relies on us also in how we choose to relate and use or pause our AI. And ultimately, I think right now it's going so fast, much faster than our ability to make sense of it, our ability to navigate it. And we don't need to be in a rush because we're all leading into one place, which is death awaits all of us and create space for the other. But we don't need to rush. We can pause and take the time to be here together and reflect together. What makes us us? What makes us human? What makes us interwoven in our humanity, in the living beings? What makes the living living? What makes consciousness conscious? And sometimes it's not just to have an answer, it's just to sit with the question.
It's such a beautiful reflection. Thank you so much, Sylvie. This really invites us to think differently about our relationship with technology and how, as you said, it touches on our mortality and our consciousness. So we might step back and take time to consider how we use our wisdom and our shared values to ensure that technology is used in service of a more life-giving part for people, places, and our planet. Thank you again. This leads naturally into another dimension of our conversation, and that's how we live with uncertainty and how we think about consciousness, technology, and the future of being human at a time where so many old assumptions are being renegotiated. And so it's my great pleasure to welcome Faheem Nusrat, who has spent more than 30 years in the tech industry as both a builder and a thoughtful critic of what it is becoming. Faheem has also spent decades exploring Eastern culture and practice, and it has been this tension between worlds that now shapes his work. He's very interested in philosophy of living together and how we can think more deeply about what it means to be human without needing a doctrine to do it. So welcome, Faheem.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, everybody, and great to be here. I'm a little hoarse because I'm recovering from a little bit of a flu, so forgive me if I'm sounding a bit rough. Brilliant. So I'm going to start with a little story, actually, going back quite a few years. So I was sitting in East London on a meditation journey at the time, and I noticed that outside of there was no difference from the outside of the window and the inside. No big deal in itself. But for me, it was one of those insights that kind of was experiential, and there was a kind of a felt sense of knowing that this was really significant. And over the time, I've realized what that really meant. It's kind of shown up later in Buddhist teachings, where it's the relationship between things is what defines the way things are. So I think that kind of lends itself to today's discourse in some way, and hopefully that will become clear as I go through this. So and that really is the insight in which I've really lived most of my life, and has led me from spiritual practice and also how I treat myself in my work environment and my desires there, but also now into the world of AI and the course that I'm also trying to lead together with a co-conspirator of ours. So Susan, you set up this discussion, and one of the focuses was creating a shared understanding. So that's the piece I'm going to try and fit into around AI, and it does actually amazingly follow on from the last video there from Sylvie, and also the talk before, because I think we might be sharing some roots in our approach to this. So it's really great to actually build upon it, and maybe in taking it in a slightly different direction. So just a quick overview of what AI is today, because I think it's just worth creating a bit of context as is important. So the field of AI is around 70 years old. So that would be a surprise to some maybe, but it's actually how it is. The version we're reacting to today is only a small part of that, and it's recent. It's sort of come from a convergence of a number of things, a bit like the railways had all these other effects. The way that the current version, as we say AI, the chatbots and people, seemingly becoming human around us and talking, that kind of thing, that's the sort of like convergence of a few things. One is the chipsets that were available for video games turned out to be very good at processing large amounts of data in parallel, including text, which is one of the core foundations of this kind of thing that we see now. The second is the internet. By that time, it filled up with a lot of human knowledge, supposedly free, as a source for getting all of that text into some kind of machine to look at it. And third, the algorithms to understand text really evolved, and you were able to have algorithms that understood bunches of text, not just words or letters. So all of this kind of like all merged, different fields suddenly all came together. And the thing that really brought them together was obviously the big tech companies, and also their capacity to bring together enormous amounts of capital and mineral extraction, and then consolidate those into data centers in which all of this that we're seeing now is predicated on. So I think it's just important to see that the field is not new in itself. And as Sylvie was saying, we've been working with AI of forms for many years. So the chess games that were there in the 1970s and 80s, the CERN projects were all using neural networks to understand science. So this isn't all brand new. It's just been packaged in a particular form that has become sellable to the masses. So I think that's just one version of it, and there's many other breeds. So here, we're looking at a philosopher called Gilbert Simondon in the course that I'm leading. It's called AI and the Human, Living with Uncertainty. And Gilbert was alive between 1924 and 1989. And he wrote a dense book called On the Mode of Existence of Technical Objects. And the core claim in that is that our culture is fundamentally misaligned with technical objects, and in fact separated them. His own project was to heal that split. and to bring machines back into relationship with us. His book opens with the line, "Culture has become a system of defense against technics. We guard against machines," he says, on the assumption that they hold no human reality at all, that they're just dead things. A little bit like, I think that's most of our kind of like foundational understanding. So why is it? It's quite controversial and there's a lot to it. So he says that two things fall out of that. Either we treat technology as an instrument, something neutral, just to use and reuse and use up, or we flip it the other way and fear it, the machine as a monster coming for us, as someone wrote in the text there, you know, like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So his deeper point is that this misunderstanding of the machine is the deepest source of our alienation. So it's a really contentious point, but it's kind of interesting to really dig into it. And we're just surfing his understanding. So this is just really me kind of like saying this is really interesting stuff that we're digging into to understand AI in a slightly different way from maybe the normal discourse. So and he kind of suggests that maybe the machine is also reflecting a part of ourselves back to us. He outlines that culture has got a defense system against it. So he also outlines, that, which is quite interesting, that people who do value technology often overreact and start treating it as almost sacred. And that's, I think, also Sylvie's point. So we swing between dismissing it and worshipping it, and miss the simpler thing, which was we are in relationship with it, not alive, but not dead either. So the interesting thing is we and our technologies form a field together, each shaping each other. How we see it isn't a small thing. It shapes how we treat it. And we were talking a bit about that earlier. He goes deeply into the conception of how the badly technical culture as we have today will, in the end, abdicate its responsibility to follow technology. It's really fascinating stuff. And I think, we're very keen to go much deeper into it. Another contemporary scholar worth reading around this subject is Francesca Sinceri from the University of Palermo, where she's taken his work and brought it up to date and investigates AI from that perspective. So there's two other things I want to really bring up before I close. So first of all, there's clock time. And this is like, different philosophers talked about this in different ways. But clock time is the kind of time you feel click by click, when the time is running long in a meeting you want to leave, the deadline is coming. It's measured, uniform, the same for everyone. The time of output, utility, getting things done. It's really the time that the whole AI industry runs on, faster, more, etc., the thing that we were just talking about. Then there's this concept of live time. And this was Bergson, I think, that came up with this, or one of the people that talked about it in this way. And it's the clock time that, the clock time is on the graph, as you can see, the units. But live time is something actually would be much more of like a spiky graph. There'll be long flat stretches, hours pass without a trace, and then moments mark you. You fall in love, you learn something, there's grief. All of those things define actually a life lived, and you can't measure that in clock time. So there's just some things to keep in mind, because I think they're quite interesting. And this is, Simondon goes into this as a way of understanding machines. It's quite complex. But his argument roughly is this: being technical, so we want to bring technical things back into our culture at a foundational level. And we start to change what technology becomes. That means learning about it from the ground up, not only as science, as in the law and then the technology just arrives out of it, but that the technical is something we're in relationship with. Simondon wanted a child to understand a feedback loop the way they understand a theorem, 1 + 1 or something like that. In a sense, they already do when they ride a bike. They understand that they're shaped by the bicycle and the bicycle shaped by it as it moves along. But to name these things, because they're foundational to being in a world of machines. And as we were saying earlier, we are shaped by those machines. So his whole point is to understand that in a completely different mindset. So to address the question that we're kind of trying to understand, how do we change the situation we're in? This complex set of interrelationships which are kind of fixed in one way, power journeys and so on. Well, one is to understand that may be a story we told about technology and really re-examine that and maybe start including technology as more of a being. In Japan, for instance, they have ceremonies. It's like retiring printing presses, and they sort of bury them, as it were, and go to have a ceremony. Also with needles, they've been worked for a lifetime. They go to the monastery and have a ceremony and thanking them for the service. So they re-enter a new cycle. So, really understanding the connection these tools have in the larger environmental context. That's one element. And then the other one is really just a very small thing, but it's this thing of how do we change AI directly? Well, it's very difficult given how they're constructed by how we engage with them. But bringing that live time to that experience rather than clock time to that experience of interaction may be a step. So I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faheem. That was really a beautiful reflection on the changing conditions of human life and how we do build that shared understanding and perhaps develop a different relationship with AI, maybe as a reflection of our own consciousness, well, created from our own consciousness, and what that can teach us about ourselves in the process. So thank you again. And finally, we turn to and expand on what all of this might look like in daily life, how we navigate connection, meaning, complexity, and practical action in this new world. So it's my pleasure to welcome Dave Nelson. I think everybody knows Dave, an entrepreneur, polymath, and dedicated advocate to complexity thinking in planetary health. He brings a broad knowledge base and an ability to really synthesize across many domains for creative problem solving. And we're so lucky to have him as part of the Nova Invited faculty because of his wide-ranging life experiences and valuable, unique lens on complexity. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm really happy that Nova has taken on the challenge of discussing a difficult topic that seems to be careening and accelerating in dramatic ways sometimes. We have the world's first IPO where a company with an embedded AI, XAI inside of it is now worth trillions of dollars almost seemingly overnight after the IPO. So it's just very interesting what's happening. A little bit about myself quickly, just so that you have a background of why I'm talking about what I'm talking about. I'm a user of AI. I run an OpenClaw instance, if you know what that means. I got on it in January 2025. It's one of the fastest growing things that's ever happened on GitHub, if you know what that is. So that's where coding repositories are. And then I'm an avid user of AI to help me be a brainstorming partner to develop things. And you'll see that in my presentation as well as soon as I start sharing my screen. But I also deeply believe that planetary health, nature relatedness is woefully deficient in our human experience. And that's because we've actually forgotten what relationship is, which I really appreciated about the relationship quotient comment. And just so that, we're all on the same page from a really big thinking platform, one of the predominant emerging theories in quantum mechanics now is relational quantum mechanics from Carlo Rovelli. So this transcends so many different time scales, so many different scales of matter. People are looking at the relational aspects of everything that we do, and AI has to be taken in that. So I'm going to share my screen now. So what this looks like in real life, and you can see I've used a motif as a campfire here with the, what I like to see as a root mycelial network and some constellations. And what we've heard so far is about foundations, about what we build on, a meta skills about learning to learn and positioning that. And I think that's actually a really, really important thing because I have kids that are 5 and 2. What's university even going to be like in 10 to 15 years? What's on-demand personal learning? What resources are people going to have access to? And then what do those resources mean in terms of the emotional and relational landscape? Who serves whom? Who is aware? What is awareness? This is a big question that we now have to ask as materialism, determinism, and reductionism reach, as Alexander Gomez-Marin calls them, their points of terminal lucidity. We're realizing that there's endpoints. We can't talk about the chemistry the linear chemistry of human connection. It seems to be so much more than those things, or our connection with the earth. And how can we know what we can't know? How do we admit that? And then what actually happens? And when I put real life or what actually happens, I put that there just to remind everybody the Nobel Prize in 2022 was given for non-locality. And that changes the nature about how we talk about reality. But as we just heard, these threads lead to a similar place. There's a space or a horizon that are in between a person and the world that they inhabit. And this is where the relationship that becomes the unit of life is formed. The magic is the relationship. When you look at a cell or a bunch of molecules, you wonder how they are working together, but they seem to be in a relational architecture. It's turtles all the way down, or as above, so below. The pattern is the relational aspect of everything we see and look at and do. Right? So we need to classify, recategorize. And if you're into math, category theory in the last 5 years has just taken off because of these things. A forest isn't a pile of trees. A forest is something very different. It's a relational architecture. It's something that happened. It's a habitat plus an ecosystem. A community is not just a bunch of individuals, right? Meaning is not a pile of data. And that's really important for us to understand when we understand what AI actually is, which is what we were just talking about. What is it? One of the fellows, or one of the scholars, I believe, at Nova is Claudia Witt, and she is from Switzerland. And she has said that everybody needs to have some type of license to use AI or to use technology. And I actually agree with the positioning here. I think that we need to be educated in this so we know what it is that we're looking at. It's not conscious, it's applied statistics. It's just very advanced. So it looks like it's generating symbiotic relationships with us, but it isn't. Why? AI can describe chocolate to a T. Maybe the texture, maybe what it might feel like if you touch it, maybe an idea of what the flavor might be, slightly bitter with some sweet with something else. But remember, when you eat chocolate, you don't get the experience in the first half a second. It's a prolonged experience like a song. Right? Taste is like a song. It plays in your mouth and in your mind. And it's different at the beginning. It's different at the end. How is AI ever going to tell you what that tastes like? And this will be the gap between analysis and what qualia is. Remember, analysis is how parts work. Qualia is the experience of the relationship of the parts working together. So remember, we can do all this. What are the flavor compounds? What's the historical context? But it'll never be able to tell me about the time I had chocolate in, say, Belgium. It was wonderful. I was standing outside of a building and it was the whole environment of experience. So that data that's in the cloud, what is that? Well, it's a record of what we've already done as humans, right? It's a memory. It's a portrait of our past. And every data set is a record of what we choose to measure. This is one of the things we have to remember about technology and AI, but it's also what we choose to ignore. AI learns from history. It also learns our blind spots, our biases, our wounds. A model trained on the world tends to reproduce the world as it was, especially by people who have not gone through the necessary things we need to for a better relational quotient, a better RQ. AI is the mirror. That mirror doesn't imagine what we can be, but it reflects what we are. So that meaning lives in between the information there. Information's processed, but meaning's lived. That's what happens between me and my kids, the doctor and a patient, the body and real food that isn't ultra processed, person, place, and planet. It lives in that pause before the answer that no data set will ever contain. It can't be reduced to a data set. But what it can do, we can use that, but it can't be the forest. It can generate a lullaby, but it can't sit beside a child that needs the lullaby sung to it with that care of being in the same physical embodied space. It can optimize a system, but it can't decide what that system is used for in the context of us. So a campfire, that dynamic relationship, we have to experience it because we have to be active participants. And so here's the shift. We have to go from world as object to world as relationship. We've already talked about that, and we need to know that the materialism, determinism, and reductionism that made everything objects doesn't work anymore. It's the relationship between the objects that makes everything come alive. This isn't a philosophy. It's actually the way that we are, because this is planetary health. It's not a number, it's a relationship. People, loneliness is a major issue, and disconnection is a health crisis. Neighborhoods, clinics, and tables shape who we are. Do we socially gather together like we used to have potlucks, for example, where we all share food? And does that food come from soil that's healthy? Because that healthy soil seems to contribute to human health at scale. So health doesn't live inside our body. It actually emerges from everything that we're in relationship with. So the second last slide. Connectedness is what we need to go for, not just connection. Intention, not just transaction. Attention, not just optimization. So we need connected care, intention of efficiency. The efficiency has to be coupled in love. The attention of empathy gives us insight into how other people might be feeling. We have to practice. The practice is the priority. We are more connected, but we're less held. And we definitely need to change that. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Dave. Incredible. The way that you've used technology with such incredible humanity. There's so much love and magic there. The magic is in the relationship, the gap between analysis and qualia. You really bring these ideas to life in such a dynamic way. And again, this seems to mirror what we are and perhaps what we can be. Absolutely love this. Thank you again. So now we really are opening the space for discussion, and we invite everyone to put your cameras on to promote that sense of community and connection once again, especially given the topic. So you can go to gallery view at the top right, and so that you can see everybody. And please use the raise hand function so that we can bring you into the discussion. It looks like we've already got our first hand up. Cameron, welcome.
Hi there. Hello, everybody. Thank you guys so much for putting this together. I mean, first and foremost, what a beautiful community of minds and souls. And it feels like such a wonderful. I'm like just blown away. First and foremost, I'm like, David, your passion, like everybody's passion, like came through. So again, I'm like buzzing right now. And to start out with mindfulness and grounding and being very intentional. My credit goes to Brian, Susan, and the rest of the team at Nova. Like stumbled upon this. And I'm just so grateful, almost to the point where I'm actually in tears, because I've been in search of a community, and I've started to put my own work together that actually solves a lot of the things that we talked about in this discussion. So Isabella, everybody a part of the team, man, I am so honored. I say that because I think what's so exciting is everybody on this call is here because we know that we can do better. We know we can do better. And, I just finished up a fellowship at Virginia Tech in their Innovation and Humanities new program that Rishi Jaitley from OpenAI had developed 3 years ago, knowing that the future is going to be centered around the humanities because we don't have a choice. So it's almost like we have to save ourselves from ourselves. And Susan, I'll try and be respectful and kind of wrap this up so other people have time to chat. But it's just such an honor. And I say that to say is, I got in academia, I love the development and the all the things that come out of that. But I'm like, I'm a passionate 3-time founder now. And, one of the things that I see as signals that we've all talked about are how do we take these big ideas, but how do we actually bring them to a material place where we can execute on them and start to see how it works in real time to bridge that gap. And I've really made that more of my calling here with what we're doing, and would honestly welcome the conversation with Nova, with you, Susan, and Brian, and anybody else that's interested in learning more, because I'm at a point where it's not about me anymore. We've had the titles, we've made the money, but I'm like, man, like to David's point, I've got an 11-year-old son, and he's coming into a world where people don't even know how to be human anymore. And that concerns me. And I know that I have the tenacity and the grit and all the things to like execute on this, but I know it's going to take a community to execute and to start to see the shifts and be able to quantify it, because there's a whole world out there that has their own bias around quantification. And to us, it's like, how do you get people to understand it? Is you got to bring math to it. So again, just this is not a self-promoting thing. It's just more of like, man, it's so beautiful to see a community as beautiful as this. And I applaud all of you and your efforts, and would love to get involved in a much bigger way to be a solution to the things that challenge us ahead. So again, thank you guys so much for the time and the stage to speak.
Well, thank you so much, Cameron, for those really beautiful thoughts. And we're all about conversations and connections. So absolutely, yes. We've got a lot of hands up. So yes, Judy, go ahead.
Hi. I actually got a certification in mental wellness some time ago through Sean Talbot that focuses on the gut microbiome. So the one thing that I would like to mention here, I love what everybody said, but keep in mind, there's a lot of data on social microbiome, and in touching on what Dave was talking about the connected relationship of nature from soil health to human health. The social microbiome influences us, and by isolating with AI and giving into this narcissistic behavior structure that AI can promote. Now, I'm not against AI. I believe used well, AI is a wonderful tool, especially for scientists to gather data and make faster summaries, faster conclusions. But it does have the gap in that the human creative element and the social microbiome element, the natural element, is completely missing. And this is what people forget. Because if you don't find the social microbiome data, emerging data as proof at this point, then all you have to think about are the known points of pheromones affecting people's hormones individually. Everybody's heard the stories, and we have proof of this, where girls in dorm rooms, suddenly their menstrual cycles changed because of pheromone cycling, and whoever was a dominant one influenced the rest of the women. This happens among men in gyms with testosterone and other things going on. That's why we have the sports mentality. AI and isolation can't break that. We can learn about it, but nature has its own set of rules and its own timetable. We are not going to break that with AI. However, we are responsible as humans in how to use AI and how to develop humanity and compassion. Like, I stayed very involved with playing music or doing creative arts in communities, because those cannot be fully done by AI. There's something missing to real musicians anyway, to trained musicians, they can hear it. There is something missing in any type of electronic or AI created music. So liberal arts, Dave has talked about that a lot. So anyway, that's just my statement. Absolutely.
I thank you very much for bringing in the role of, what we're not doing when we're interacting with AI. We're not necessarily in nature, and we do have a strong awareness and interest in the social microbiome and microbiomes in general. And Susan Erdman has and others in this community have been talking about exactly what you're saying. So, but thank you for bringing it into this conversation. Sylvie, we only saw you recorded, so now we get to see you live. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. I just wanted to add a little thing, because in the pre-recording, I didn't get to mention this point, and it was very powerful to listen also to all the panelists, which is, I think, some of the great challenge we're facing, that is climate crisis or the desire to slow down AI. It hits directly to the collective action problem, which is actually a relational problem. Is how do we build trust? How do we build community? How do we engage with differences? And ultimately, these collective action problems are us facing the sense of like, oh, but if we don't do it, they'll do it. And that's actually a relational problem that actually no AI can help us. There can be maybe governance that help us, but it's mostly getting around the table with our bodies and talking about the deep question about what is it that we want to put at the core of our values. And so I think this conference is amazing because it touched exactly on, yes, we absolutely need to grow our relational intelligence because our technology demands that of us. It demands us to grow in our wisdom. And if we actually look at where our relational capacity is, we are not matching our technology yet. And so even to stand for like, okay, we need to slow down requires a huge relational breakthrough to come together with people who might have very different views and discuss about those hard questions about what it means to be human beings, what is valuable in life. And that is absolutely a relational breakthrough that it pleases me to be here because I see that people hearing their heart is what we all have at heart there. So yeah, I wanted to add that point on the build up with everybody else, what everybody else has said.
Thank you so much. Yes, I mean, all of our crises are relational, aren't they? So I think that really underscores the need to shift our relational thinking into a much more reciprocity and mutualism, because then we will be able to solve our problems much more effectively, because it's so fragmented at the moment. Thank you so much. George.
Yeah, thanks. I'm always astonished at how much can be packed into 7-minute talks. This has been a fantastic set of talks. Dave, I want to come to something you said about piles of data. Is there any evidence at all that large language models, which do rely on these piles of data, can capture these emergent properties that you're talking about that have been touched on by so many people in terms of relational understanding?
It's a great question, George, and I think that has a lot to do with statistical mechanics and predictive statistics. So you're going to get the thing about this is if you look into something called computational irreducibility, Stephen Wolfram's work, you'll find out that some of these data sets will become so large that they'll eclipse the ability of a computational network to actually look at the data. It depends on the resolution in the data set and how it's categorized. That's going to become important in the future. An infinite data set is going to be hard to corral to get any meaningful things out of it because the data is relational. We just don't understand the relational architectures that we need yet. We only have a couple right now that we're using, and I think that that's going to greatly expand. Like the answers that come out and the questions we give AI and the layers of infrastructure that it deals with, mathematics is going to really change the fidelity of that. So I don't know how to answer your question, but
can I just jump in on that one, perhaps, because there's an interesting thing around scale. So one of these things that happened, and I think it relates to what you're saying, David, is so there's a certain point in which these language models were quite good at doing predictive texts. And then they started scaling up the number of CPUs or compute power that's kind of managing this stuff, just to be, And then what happens was they suddenly realized they were starting to see these language models being able to translate English to Japanese without being taught how to. So some people call that an emergent property. And then they later discredited that and said it wasn't really emergent because it depends on how you measure changes. So the question is, it depends on who you're talking to sometimes, because they're going to talk about it as like it's emergent. And all of the kind of like the marketing media will say, yes, this is it's going to change everything, et cetera, but I'm sure that if you really look under the surface, you're going to see that this is an automation and there's a structure to it and it's happening in a certain way and there's constraints and so on. So but in terms of these emergent qualities, I think we're going to see surprising things that we hadn't anticipated, like something talking back to you and you feeling like they understand your emotional situation, or whatever it is. But whether it is what we think it is, that's the interesting thing. And I think that's where, we were talking about, we need a technical education, Yeah.
Thank you. Matthias, thank you for waiting patiently there.
Okay, thanks to you. And this is also actually echoing like previous words. This is a thank you note to speakers, to Nova, because I think I think we can all say, at least I can do that when we think about AI and when we uh, think about relationships, we can feel the difference. We can actually feel the difference, but we need ways. As I work in academia, for example, I think we desperately need uh, ways to articulate that difference. What makes us human? What's the difference? What AI is built for, and what's the future? So, what's the human factor? What's the meaning of that? So, I was making a presentation the other day about like the use of poetry in science, and a question came up about like what about AI and poetry? Do you think that can have a future? Can AI build like poetry? And I feel the difference a lot. I've asked AI to build me or draft me a very beautiful poetry based on this topic. It gives me something back, but I really feel the difference that the answer I gave at the moment, it was something like I don't know. I think it was something like doing poetry with AI. It's like trying to articulate a very meaningful, tragic, desperate lived experience, but with anesthesia, like under the effects of anesthesia, you know. But after this sets of like wonderful talks, I think uh, it gave me materials, it gave me like tools to articulate what a difference uh, would mean, what that difference would look like. It's like because I don't know, poetry is about like a desperate attempt to communicate lived experiences, and that somehow cannot see it happening with AI. That's just what I wanted to say, and thank you all for all your wonderful talks.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I think this really illustrates how we need to rethink academia so we can bring more of our humanity and really shift the conversation. So in many ways, this AI conversation is precipitating so much more cross-disciplinary thinking and feeling around all of this. So thank you for sharing that. Now, Eleanor, you've also been waiting patiently. We're close to time, but I want to hear what you have to say, please.
Hi. First, thank you so much for everything that's been said. Like every single sentence just hits home, and really, really needs to be said. I had a question I actually had two, but I'll just do one. A question for the speakers. Lately, I've been meditating on what it means to be innately and purely human, and I haven't gone too far with it. Mostly because I've been wrestling with the question that I'd like to extend to you guys on what it means to be human and nothing else. What separates us from other species, AI included, I think. Are there answers on that from the speakers?
Dave, you've done
separate. We're not separate. That's likely it may appear that it's a Markovian blanket. If you're going to the math, that's what it would be, a Markovian blanket. But it only assumes disconnection. If you look at the roots of a tree, if you change the scale of resolution, it's very difficult to tell where the tree ends, the mycelial network begins. It's very difficult to tell where we end and the microbiome begins. So that I think that's the big thing about materialism, reductionism, determinism. We've been sold, and it's not true.
Yes, beautiful. And how we think about and experience our own consciousness. And I love the way that this is inviting those blurry edges so that we're not seeing ourselves as separate anymore. One more. Miljoy, Miljoy, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for this.
Welcome.
Echo everybody else's praises and the speakers. Isabelle, I mean, I was drawn to this here because of your article on the era of relational intelligence. And all the information here has been great. And that question of like what it is to be human. And my question is, where do you begin? Because I feel like the conversations here, we are all very lived and experienced. Therefore, we've got so much information and we can actually connect where our position is in relational intelligence. But when I work with corporates or leaders who are unconscious, have unconscious biases, and we talk about the connection and relation, then you add AI and quantum physics and all of these things. For me, that experience then goes off, God, this is just too overwhelming. So then how do we get back to center, reconnect, and start that conversation or relation?
Yeah, Mildred, it's such a beautiful question. And recentering relationships in everything we do is clearly a movement building that is required, and this convening, these spaces where we discuss and elevate is really, really important to me to do this. There are other things that I think need to happen. One is having these concepts of relationships embedded into better measurements, whether at the individual and or interactional basis or at country or city levels. So what if we had, similar to a happiness index, what if we had a relational intelligence index for countries or for cities or communities to adopt? But I think we also need to elevate what is already happening on efforts that are happening everywhere in communities, in schools, in health domains, in work environments, on relational intelligence models, if you like, of things that are already working, and not only elevating them, but ideally supporting them so that they can expand their incredible work and reach. And then lastly, how do we embed relational intelligence more in our schools? That's obviously an area that I'm deeply passionate about, given that my work is in education. How do we build relational intelligence networks of schools so that schools we can learn from amazing work that is happening, and the creative, our creative teachers and education leaders and learners themselves, as well as equip all these amazing individuals with the tools that they may need as we are building right now. There's a lot of discourse in education settings and more broadly in workplace on building AI literacy. So lots of investments are going in AI literacy, AI fluency. What if we had human literacy, relational literacy? It sounds so basic and obvious, but why are we solely focusing on our connection as human with machines, which is AI literacy? That's what it means. Which I'm not saying it's not important. I think that equipping our young people with the tools to understand and what are the affordances and risks with this technology is very important, but also how can we ensure that we pay attention to relational skills, relational competencies, and build those at the same time, or at least at the same importance, or maybe I would argue even more important than connecting to machines. So thank you, Mildred, for this beautiful question. As you can tell, I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I could go on, but I think we need system change, and we need all of you on this call to literally be on this. I think there's a big collective action and movement building that needs to happen. I'm just so grateful for Susan to gather us on this call.
Thank you so much, really. That's such a beautiful way to probably wrap up, although I saw another hand go up, but we are on time. If there is any, if up on time, if there are any urgent points that wish to be made, very happy to hear them.
Just following on from the where do we begin question, one thing that comes to mind for me is, we're talking about that self-awareness component, and there's a lot of work for us to do. For me, one place to start is at home. Who have we not said I love you to recently? Who is it that we need to forgive, that Bronnie Ware talks about on our deathbeds, that we think about? And those very basic things that Isabelle highlighted are very, very, very basic, but they're right in front of us, you know. And that old Chinese proverb that, you know, before trying to change the world, look around your own home 3 times comes to mind. You know, where's your next door neighbor? Do you know what their health they're in and how they're doing? And so I think that's somewhere really easy to start in a really practical way that will also help us to embody some of these systemic, and movement building activities that we're doing.
Thank you. That's such a beautiful way to wrap up, I think. And, you know, I think in answer to the previous question too, it's happening now. It's happening right now in this moment through communities like this. And there are many, many more. So I really do think there's a need for groups actually articulating and exploring through these deeper channels. So we are coming up to time, and I want to extend my deep gratitude to all of our speakers for the depth, the clarity, the love within your contributions. You've really helped us explore relational intelligence, not as a soft skill, but really one of the, or perhaps the most essential capacities of our time, a foundation for learning, for meaning, for trust, for cooperation, wisdom, and ultimately human flourishing. We, of course, want to thank the Nova Institute and Lachlan at CorpCom in Melbourne for supporting today's session. And as always, thanks to all of you for your presence, your reflections, and your heart and energy. Our next campfire will be in September. We haven't got a fixed date yet, but that will come, and we'll share the details in due course. But we welcome many conversations in the meantime. So please reach out. And so a big group wave, big hug to all of you. We're going to just close now. So thank you all. Wishing you health and happiness until we see you again. Bye.